Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week we crawl out of the hole we're living in and make a story based on totally not true facts. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And this story has nothing at all to do with reality. Well, here we go. Recap to medicated Band-Aid. I was thinking about it, and we're going to bring back why medicated Band-Aid is such an important part of the plot. So we have a system of government built on trial by combat, basically. Might makes right. May righteousness go to the victor. Sort of a duel to figure out society. I think we mentioned in the last episode that there's no way that this society is being sort of fruitful, and this society is definitely based on some terrible precedents that is hopefully going to be addressed. This is not a society where everyone's having a good time. So,
well, speak for yourself.
Yeah. For those of us who don't like to fight. The beginning scene had a psychiatrist sort of lazily guiding someone, trying to encourage them, using memes and fun pills to make them quote unquote better, and then eventually seeing them off themselves and having sort of a come to Jesus moment as a phrase, having a sort of realization that everything that he'd been attempting to do was in fact wrong, and how he'd been sort of attempting to go about addressing the mental health crisis was in fact misguided. Reed had something based on a book he was reading. He'd been reading Dune, and I believe his thing based on a book he was reading was the kind of power play between power structures. Is that correct, Reed?
Right.
Right. So this kind of upper political, but in some ways really violent system displayed inside of Dune is what he was trying to get. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, it was struck me as interesting that Seth's government type with this trial by combat, the system of regime change around this really brutal system of the Fremen who were forced into kind of a very harsh reality because of just basic survival in this desert planet, Arrakis. And that the leaders had to be people, men of substance, men of prowess, men who are competent. And what happened was if regime changed by challenging the leader to try, to duel to the death, and they would fight it out with knives and, to the victor. That's how regimes were changed. And what it did is it created an atmosphere where you had very competent, very on top of their game leaders. However, when Dune, one of the key elements of Dune is the hero kind of rose to prominence, and everybody was expecting him to challenge the leader of the Stitch, the original, the kind of the clan that he had become part of. He said, "Why would I cut off my right arm? You are my friend, and you are everything that is good about the people." And he kind of took on like a pan-clan leadership where he nurtured the leadership underneath him. And it was kind of like well, this is the way it's always been done. Well, times change. And
right.
So that was the thing that I like. The psychiatrist, was kind of going along, reading his tarot cards and rolling a joint or whatever, and the shocking result of someone who had just been to him for help decided to go through with the suicide, and it was like times need to change, and then this whole trial by combat thing.
Right. And so then that was 2 weeks ago. Last week we had a wise old woman, a famous person, and a villain's sidekick. Our villain's sidekick was the Bruce. He's the head of the what was it called?
Champions of Valor.
Champions of Valor, which was like a clan dedicated to being people's champion. Because in this system of government, if you were a woman or someone who couldn't fight for yourself, you could basically name a champion, and a champion could come forth. And these people were kind of, really monetarily motivated, really willing to do anything to win, whether that was performance-enhancing drugs, whether that was manipulation of the rules as much as they could be. They were really just ready to give up their honor to whoever it was that needed it. Next, you had the famous person. I don't remember what his name is.
Royce Rondo. And
he sort of rose to prominence as this sort of famous champion, but he has basically done the exact opposite as Bruce in that he will fight for you, but he will only fight for those who he could fight for anyone and get as much money as he wanted, but he has decided to only fight for those that he believes in, which is really good, but it also is controversial because, he's a famous person. People kind of follow him. So now you have these kind of Rondonites or Roycians, people who kind of are following his quote unquote code of honor, and the kind of upper ruling families are kind of irritated and trying to figure out how they can use him because he has essentially a standing army of people who might go his way or not, who say that they want to do things the way that he says. And so people are getting kind of scared because at the drop of a hat, he could basically say the word and people would kind of do whatever he wants. So I can just see the political scene getting really tense and really scary. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that track with everything you had, Reed?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, that's just not might makes right, but might for right. Like that's, right out of the old musical Camelot,
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we had a wise old woman, Catherine, and it was her son that the psychiatrist patient, and after that she has basically given up on the system and is kind of like because most of the families are sort of run in a matriarchal way because women are hedged from having to do combat themselves. So most families are sort of female facing because if you offend a female, then one of their highly trained men can then come and champion for them. So a lot of the families and a lot of the politics are very female facing and matriarchal made. And Catherine, it's no different for Catherine, except her family is kind of in the north. Like she doesn't live in the city and participate in normal politic, partially because she is so done with the system. And there's some kind of festival. I don't remember what we said it was, but it's some kind of festival happening. And this is where this is all going to come to a head. Her plan is she's been training people for years now and is going to basically take over the government and dissolve it via force, right? Surgical strikes with highly trained individuals. They have patents on special kinds of steel. They have patents on crossbow cranks.
Yeah, you said that she, prominent in her family were clockmakers and bell makers, armors. So they had like the tech to kind of like go into weaponry, so to speak.
Yep. And so that's what she's planning on. And that is where we're sitting, where we've kind of decided that those three characters sort of fill out the world enough, and now with this last episode, we can kind of tie it all together. So what story elements did you guys have?
I have wild card, and I chose prophecy.
Seth?
I had unique weapon.
And I had random insert. So should we do prophecy first? My insert is pretty integral to the story, but I'd be happy to hear the wild card or the unique weapon first.
I'll just go with the prophecy. It's pretty straightforward. So
okay.
This isn't like somebody uncovered an old manuscript that had a big prophecy that foretells things. It's specifically prophetic dreams. And Catherine, before her son died, her husband had been forced into a situation and had to champion a thing and came up against someone trained better than him, and although as far as Catherine was concerned, he certainly wasn't in the wrong, but it came out that he was in the wrong because he was destroyed.
Right. And
she had dreamed it. She had dreamed of her husband's demise in a trial by combat ring, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then she began noticing, and other people began noticing that it was kind of like for a while now, some people's dreams, not all dreams, but some dreams were very vivid, and some of those dreams came true. And then she had that event with her son committing suicide, and she was in a state of pondering what all this means and recognizing the corruption of the system. And then she dreamed that a favorite cousin would die also in challenge by combat. And she intervened. She went to the person who had the grievance, and she became an intermediary and literally talked them down and kind of let her cousin off the hook. So it was a woman, and she had hired one of the professional champion guild, one of Bruce's guys. So it was a foregone conclusion that her cousin, her male cousin, would probably be defeated. But anyway, she was able to get them to kiss and make up and not have it. And then she said, aha, these prophetic dreams can be altered if we take action. They're warnings. They're not necessarily, I think of, Jonah and the whale. He was sent to Nineveh to say, prepare to meet your doom. You're so wicked and you're so horrible that you have incurred the wrath of God Almighty. And you and your whole society and your entire city is going to be destroyed. So they repented in ashes and sackcloth, right? And God's heart was moved, and he repented of the wrath that he had for them, and he let them off the hook. And of course, Jonah was huffy about that, which I've always been interested in that. What was going on with Jonah that he was mad? He wanted these people to fry. But anyway, I always love the line God says, Jonah, do you do well to be angry? I think that's one of the great lines a person could do in counseling another. If you find somebody who's all like full of anger and bitterness, do you do well to be angry? Anyway, sorry about that. There's a total aside. I can't help it. Some Bible stories are just so great that they bear repetition. But anyway, point is, so she became kind of a champion of this notion. If you have a dream, take action, which plays into her whole thing about like, we need to take action against this corrupt system. And Royce also had a dream. He realized that his following was really about changing the system, whereas the Champions of Valor, Bruce's gang, was about keeping the system in place because it was their source of power. And he had a dream that it was going to come to a showdown between him and Bruce, and that Bruce was going to call him out. And the details of that I'll save because they may fit into the story better in a different place. But anyway, that's so that the idea of prophetic dreams taking action in this scenario.
Okay, cool. Seth, do you want to go next, or should I go next with my random insert?
I'll go next. It's not necessarily one weapon, but a weapon type that's used. Particularly, I would say by people like Bruce's gang, especially with the enhancement drugs.
Right.
Basically, what this weapon is like one of the only things that comes to mind, and maybe I'm off a little bit, but I know you've seen it, the chrome shelled Regos.
Yeah.
Right. So kind of like that, where it's more like they're channeling their, I don't know, not their chakras, but they're like their ki or their chi through the weapon. Which then, if someone is, let's say, more passionate, more powerful, and like putting themselves into it, it would then take, and not all of them are like this, but it's like a special, like, I don't know, mechanism that gets put in the weapon that then channels that energy through, through to make a more powerful hit, to, make an electric shock, make an arrow fly straighter, harder hit, and, pierce through armor. I mean, with like intention put to it. So you imagine, someone, the kids were listening through Lord of the Rings too, and part of what I was explaining to them with some different types of magic was people like Aragon or some of these great people, where it wasn't that they were magical, but their power of will and presence, and like they were just like, in the way that it explains that, they were not like other men, where then just their presence, just him calling out to the riders of Rohan, just the power and authority that he presents, makes him a much more powerful person. And so you could have someone, let's say, like Royce, what's his name?
Royce Rondo.
Royce Rondo. So it'd be like he could have one of these, and because of his passion and his, strength of will, could endow what he does with much more power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because of his, force of will and his not stature like height, but just his presence and his, control of his, energy and, movement and stuff like that. Whereas then like Bruce's gang, like they're all using these, but they get that hyped up by, taking, I don't know if that like cocaine or like uppers and like all the
drugs
stuff that
and stuff like that,
hype and steroids, and it just, fries them. And so for that little bit of combat, they're going to be like just psyched out and then just, crazy. So it's more or less a weapon type that's used.
I think of the Viking berserkers,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that goes really, really well into the random insert, which is why did the world get this way at the start? So what happened is the technology to use these weapons and machines, because it's not just weapons, it's also machines like a pickaxe that you put your will behind it and you can, or a chisel. You put your will behind it and you could carve out a better sculpture. These things have existed for a long time, and the magic of it has always been sort of a mystery to people. But then what was discovered was a drug that you could take that would distill your will. And basically, before, it was only people of great passion, people of great skill, people of great lineage that could use these weapons or these artifacts. But with the discovery of this drug, it essentially makes you go manic, and therefore all of these weapons activate. So they don't determine who is of strong moral character. They just sense and amplify the power of a strong character. That makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's these drugs, and the most popular one, everyone takes, because it's like coffee. It's like sugar. It's like nicotine. It's just the thing that gets society going.
It's a gamer that pounds the Red Bulls because it's on for the night.
Yeah, well, it's melange.
Right.
Right, in the Dune universe.
Yeah.
You think better, you think clearer, you're more passionate, you are more guided, and it's been around for, over 100 years now, and it's sort of, it's just a part of life. But the thing that it does is it not only makes it so you can activate these things on a low level, and then if you take higher dosages on a much kind of unsafe level, like the Champions of Valor do, but it also takes how do I say this? It restricts the production of neural pathways, right? All it does is increase the frequency and the strength of the pathways you already have, right? So if you've been taking this your whole life, changing your mind and trying to figure out a new way to do something is very difficult, right? It makes you more passionate, but only about the things you were already passionate about, right? So this is why Catherine, while she is encouraging people to do things about the prophecy dream visions, is not changing her mind about attacking. It's why people have to die. She cannot change the path that she's on, because unfortunately she takes these drugs. She doesn't take them to excess. She just takes them like everybody else, so she can stay sharp, so she can stay up to date, so that her mind can work at that next higher level, so she can compete. All these things that are real. And yeah, maybe sometimes she takes a little bit more if she needs to, really figure something out, but she doesn't take as much as they do. So it's like this kind of thing that's just everyone kind of consumes. And the thing I want to say that's different is that I think that Royce and our hero, who we should introduce at some point in time, don't take them at all.
Whoa.
Royce came down from them, which is why he has his fame of being a fighter who could fight anyone, but secretly he has diminished. And so he kind of moved into more of an administrative role inside of the organization that he's running or is a part of. He's still good, he's still quick, but he's not the legend that he used to be, right? Because at some point in time, he recognized it's something along this path that he was able to split away. That is where he recognized that he needs to change his mind, but he couldn't because he was taking this. He couldn't because he was doing this thing. And so something happened and he went on he went cold turkey. He quit cold turkey, and now he's back and he isn't taking it anymore. So people talk about his weird diet. People talk about how he's an eccentric who only eats meats prepared by his own special chefs. How he doesn't have, he doesn't buy his salt, which is laced with this stuff, because that's the easiest way for everyone to get it, by the commercial routes. He buys special Himalayan pink salt, and everyone is, all of his Roycians all switch over to this salt, but then it makes their heads hurt as they start to go through withdrawals from this drug. And so then they switch back or they don't. And that's what's part of what's causing this kind of conflict, is that Royce is trying to lead by example, and you can't just come out against the drug because it's the coffee, it's the nicotine, it's the sugar, it's the thing that's driving the society at this point in time. But he has to kind of softly come out against it. And this was taught to him, and this was encouraged to him by the psychiatrist, who has since also completely taken himself off of it, right? It's been 15 or so years since the death of his patient, and now he is completely off of it, and his daughter, who is the hero psychiatrist, is protected by the hero's sidekick, which is one of Royce's proteges, who is also coming off of it. He's like going through that sort of time. So that's the random insert. That's kind of how I see it. So there's like this background issue. This is one of the reasons why Catherine, while she wants what's right, is going about it in an ultimately violent way, because she can't give up the idea that you need to might makes right it. So she's trying to fix the might makes right problem by being mightier.
Yeah.
And it's like, props to you for trying to fix something, but you're not fixing it the right way because of the influence of this drug. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm trying to figure out how the story would go, how the story would work. Because I have this idea that there's sort of a festival or something going on, kind of like, was it a change of the guard? Is that what it was? We were talking about this last time. Was it like a change of the leadership structure? Like every couple of years, the new families, all the high families sort of compete together, and whoever has whoever wins, that's who are supposed to be the rulers for this next couple of years. And that's where Catherine's planning her big attack,
Right. I don't remember that actually, but I might have been drifting during that discussion.
Right. It could have been something, along those lines. I think it was towards the end as we were, trying to wrap up.
Yeah, and sometimes we talk after we're done recording because we think it's such a good story, and I just forget that we're not recording and we should write it down or something. I'm just trying to figure out the right way, because it makes sense if something like that's happening. That's where Catherine is going to sort of interject. I'm just trying to find something for the hero and the hero's sidekick to do, right? My thought is that the psychiatrist and Royce are working together, right? Because Reed said that Royce was there and saw this person, saw the whole exchange happen.
Right.
And that was like the beginning of his realization that something needed to change. And then him and the psychiatrist sort of worked together to come to this place of like, oh, it's this drug. Oh, it's the culture. Oh, it's all these things. And then to sort of wean themselves off and sort of be working to where they are today. I'm just trying to figure out what it is we want the hero to do, or if we just want to say that like Royce is the hero or something like that, and then in that case, I guess maybe we don't really need a hero.
Well, I like the idea of introducing this character, the daughter, kind of protege, heir apparent of the wise old man's practice, so to speak, or following.
Right.
I think she could play. Well, women have a special place in this society because they can speak with more impunity. I mean, if a guy starts calling people out, he's got to fight for it,
Right.
See what I'm saying? It would make sense that we would have a female hero in this case because of the twist in society with the vulnerability of men in everything is a challenge. Everything you can be interpreted as calling someone out if you just choose to disagree.
Right, but also the need for that man that's always with her to because not everything needs to rise to an actual fight.
Right.
It's in the same way we were talking about last week, how a lot of the fighters are in themselves lawyers, figuring out what level of violence is necessary for this level of,
right.
In the same way, she can talk, and kind of the guy, or the hero's sidekick, the guy in the story, just like flexes, like shows off, he does like sword forms around her while she's speaking. So everyone knows, okay, he's of like this caliber. I'm not saying in reality, but you understand what I mean? Like,
yeah.
He has to show the herons on his blade so that people kind of know he is who he says he is, because he could just be a guy who knows nothing with a sword, and then they can challenge, because you have to think about a society like this. If people are going to put actual credence behind when somebody fights like that, you put credence before that as well, when you're just being challenged. When you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I have an idea for what this festival is and how our characters can play into it. So it's like their version of like election season, right? So it's like several weeks of debates, things, and sure, not everything has to come to a fight. If you can win over your opponent, or have the mightiest champions on your side. Like, again, they're lawyers. So it's like, and you were talking some of this, it's like, maybe not to this point, but it's like all these different talks. And so the different candidates are coming forth with, this is how I would be doing things. And, and then the lawyers or the champions would be like, okay, that's a cause to champion, and so then they would get behind different candidates. And if it came to a fight, because that's what then you'd be looking at, is you're like winning over delegates for your position.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so then if two people kind of are opposing getting up to the higher point, and now they've got all the different, champions on their side, it could come to a fight. And I think that's where, I was bringing in last time what I'd kind of like to see it end with kind of this, like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of idea. But there's like 6 different groups. So you have Catherine coming down, and now she's kind of starting to get things in, but she wants a fight. So she's coming in and starting to get things riled up.
Right.
But then you have our villain, who's this other lady who's Bruce's boss, right? And so he's kind of been like the protectorate of all of their kind of wicked dealings, and they kind of push through what they want because they have, the mightiest champions.
Right.
But they're always there to kind of protect their little dealings and make things go away. And, and so you have that going on. You have, let's say, the hero's, or not the hero, the psychologist's daughter. She's coming in, and then she's trying to bring in this more, other perspective. And then she's getting people on her side. And it, then accumulates to Catherine playing her hand, wanting a fight, and perhaps another group coming in. And then I would say the break off of Royce's thing, take like some of the more zealot, then say, okay, we need to take down the whole system. Yeah. Well, then they come in and start trying to just, cause mass chaos. But then you've got Royce pulled into it to then, one, try to get what's her name out, because now Catherine is here trying to kill all of them. But then they have to then make a stand and take out the villain lady and Bruce's gang.
Yeah.
And so it's like a whole festival. And so you got all these people involved in it that don't really think that it's, any more than, the debates coming to their usual, fighting to see who's actually going to get the top positions. And so you've got, I don't know, in my mind, all these like weird, almost like Coliseum spectators along the streets as, in the streets, one group is in here trying to just like take down every part of the government from this side. And Catherine is trying to take down every part of the government from this side. And then you've got Royce trying to then put down this other weird zealot, that group that thinks they're with him or doing what he'd really want to be done. But then also having to get the psychologist and his daughter out because it's turned sour. And then it's like, they're, kind of like special opsing through the streets. And then, as people are just on the rooftops, like cheering and like thinking it's some kind of game. And
yeah, I like that. Just multiple angles from multiple different things. And one of the things I'd like to see with the book is I'd like to see the book be, okay, this is going to sound weird. If this was a book, what I'd like to see was it be very confusing. It be all flashbacks, but the book is set in the festival, right? So you get a little bit of the fight between these two different people, and you see people up cheering, and you're like, why are they cheering? And then there's like a minute break where then people talk about why the cheering, and then all of a sudden you're what's going on there, and then there's some more fighting, and then another group comes in and there's some conflict, and then there's a minute of rest, and then there's kind of a callback over here.
Yeah.
And then it kind of continues on as you're getting kind of maybe closer and closer to the Capitol building or the gates or something. As you're getting these sort of moments of rest, it's like you're fighting and fighting and fighting, and you've killed all the enemies, and then they just walk straight into a coffee shop. And the coffee shop is like, oh, great God, how many kills? Oh, you got 5 kills. Here's 5 glasses of wine. And you're like, what is going on in this story?
Yeah. It's really funny that you go there, because when I was explaining, I told you that I had part of the prophecy, the dream prophecy thing yet to come.
Yeah.
And this thing that Catherine had noticed, that sometimes if you have dream a dream and it's a horrible outcome, you can literally intervene and change the course.
Right.
Well, my brother was a pretty passable athlete. He wasn't brilliant. He was not the kind of high school athlete that like colleges would recruit, right? And he played for a small school, but he played middle linebacker in football. In his senior year, there was one game they were up against a team that they were expected to probably lose to, that they had better record. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, but have any of you ever had deja vu?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like most of the time for me, what happens with deja vu is like, it's like I've been in this exact setting before, but yet I know I've never been here or never been with these people in this setting before, and yet I have this experience that this has happened to me before. And it brings up speculation that could be, a phase shift, that there's an alternate reality happening, or, it's like, there's all many speculations about what deja vu could be.
Right.
But my brother had this experience where in the first half of this football game, the ball would snap. He's middle linebacker, right? The ball would snap. As soon as the ball was snapped, he could see the play. And he could ran to the place, up point of attack, and make the tackle. I mean, he played like everybody thought he was playing out of his mind. And he was. He played literally a whole half of football where as soon as the ball was snapped, he knew exactly what was happening. And it wasn't because he was this brilliant,
football player.
Yeah, right. It just, and then toward the end of the first half, once the ball was snapped and everything went blank, and it turns out that he had a concussion and was knocked out for the rest of the game.
Oh, no.
But anyway, so where I was going with this is that Royce had the dream, that he was going to be called out and have to face Bruce. And it was part of the kind of the crescendo of the conflict at this festival, right? And he had this vision that Rondo had employed a secret weapon. And it was like he had this special, food, and it had been, he knew from his dream that it was going to be hand to hand. So no edged weapons, all this. But it doesn't mean that these guys are lethal. They could kill with their hands. So it isn't like it was not going to be to the death.
Right.
But it was going to be skill on skill. Well, then in his dream, he saw that he had a special, like part of his, like in the belt area, like a dart would flip out, and he knew instinctively that it was poison. So like in the midst of grappling, he could just employ this thing, swivel his hip like he was just in making a wrestling move, but it would pierce and be poison, and it was a dirty trick, right? But he knew that he had this prophecy dream, so he was in a position to counter it and anticipate the moves. And because he had this sense that he was going to be walking in this place where he would be able to sense immediately when this was going to be employed, he would be able to anticipate it and defeat him. But anyway, so that was pretty funny that you would bring this up, because that was just where I was going with the prophecy.
Yeah, that's interesting. That I was just thinking that kind of, that kind of prophecy lends itself to deja vu.
Exactly.
And I imagine they have like this whole concept of might makes right is probably really difficult to settle with the idea that some people get predictions about who is going to win, because if you get a prediction from who knows what, that this person is going to win, then guess what? It's already been decided.
Yeah.
I imagine the philosophical fighters would have a difficult time sort of rectifying that with their own brains.
Yeah, really.
It's like, is it worth fighting?
Is this a dweem within a dweem?
Yeah, have you seen it?
Yeah.
Like, I have seen your death. That could be like a phrase that you tell when you're about to fight someone. You pull out your sword, I have seen your death. And it's like, how could they know that you were lying?
Right.
Yeah.
And then they proceed to call out all the moves that they had already planned out in their head, and the guy just kind of like...
Yeah, wigs them out.
Yeah. My mind just went to that that kind of martial art guy that connected himself with Jean-Luc Picard in the knockoff, spin-off Star Trek series Picard when he's older, and he decides to sign on as his bodyguard, and he's part of this martial art, and what they do is their like special thing is swords, and then before any fight, they would say, "Please choose to live, because you engage me, you're dying," basically. But that was their mantra. They say, "Please choose to live." I could see this, like, yeah. I have seen your death. Please choose to live. Yeah.
I also have this kind of idea that, okay, here's a weird idea. We're getting close to the end, so here's a weird idea. Everyone is not just seeing prophecies. Everyone is not just seeing their future. Everyone is seeing the future.
Ooh.
So multiple people have had multiple dreams about the city burning in various ways, right? But the way we present it in the books is like, I'm not sleeping well, or town criers or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we have this kind of picture all of a sudden as the sort of book gets close to the end. Everyone's fighting towards the Capitol building. Everyone's fighting towards the center. Everyone's fighting towards whatever it is the main thing. You get this picture that, oh my goodness, if you go back and read at the beginning of the chapters, when we do a little thing of a little dream that each person is having, and you put them all together, that's today. That's this fight that's happening.
Okay.
People have been dreaming about this day, so that if you go back and just take all the prophecies people have talked about in bits and pieces and write them all down, you'll get a perfect picture of what's happening. And you'll know who wins. And no one, the end of the book is no one knows. That we never say who wins. You have to go back and read the prophecies,
right,
to actually know. Everyone kind of, Royce is there, the psychiatrist's daughter is there with the hero's sidekick.
Yeah.
There's some Roycians who have, gone his way, so they're there. Royce is bloody from fighting Bruce, and this all kind of clicks as they're talking about it, because that's what you ask anyone, but when you go to journey with them, like, have you dreamed about this day?
Ooh.
Or have you seen this day?
Yeah.
Right. And so they kind of ask themselves that, and then someone says something, and then someone says something else, and everything lines in, and then they go, so we know who we have to fight at the top here. Yes.
My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
No, but they kind of say, like, so we all know who we have to fight at the top here. And we all know the steps we have to take. And we know who will not be coming back. And then they go up the stairs, and that's the end of the book.
Cool, man. That's great.
Ladies and gentlemen. Seth, do you have anything else to add?
I was just going to say something where then it's like they come to terms with that, and it's like, so are we in this? And it's like, and then kind of like the founders of America, we pledge our wealth, our health, and our sacred honor.
Yeah.
Or whatever that is. It's like, so that, they move forward to what needs to be done. Half of them knowing, kind of the outcomes of what's,
right.
happening, going up the steps.
And the reader could find that out by just going back and lining up all the prophecies everyone has written out, and then you'd know what the end was. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. Thank you for joining us for this series of Medicated Band-Aid. Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, if you like this series, if you like this podcast, give us an @. Add us on Twitter at @GetsBettercast, or send us an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll be back next week with a little conversation about this episode, and then a new one after that. But until next time, we'll see you guys later. Bye.